Welcome to Fort Worth 148's podcast, where we meet to discuss Masonic topics and strive to build value in the brotherhood. The opinions and statements of the participants do not represent any positions or stance of any Grand Lodge or Lodge and are solely the viewpoints of the participants. Welcome back to the podcast, brothers. This is Rhit Moore, past master and current secretary, Fort Worth 148.
Gabriel Jagush, Master Mason with Fort Worth 148. And today we have a special guest with us.
This is David Bindel. I'm the Worshipful Master of Jewel P Lightfoot Lodge, number 1283 in Dallas, Texas.
Good having you, David. And
awesome.
We'll throw this out there, soon to be junior past master. So congratulations on being set free.
Well, thank you very much. Soon to be secretary, too.
Oh, okay, so
nice.
that's not being set free at all. That's just being chained down even harder.
A different kind of responsibility, for sure.
For sure. Rhit knows
Absolutely.
all about that.
I saw a meme the other day that I nearly posted, but I thought, no, I better not post that. It's Morpheus holding the two pills, from the Matrix, and it says, what if I told you that the Worshipful Master was just a puppet and the secretary ran the lodge? I can't post that.
Are you really wrong, though?
Well, there are some lodges to where those secretaries can get pretty, they can wield some authority.
Mm-hmm.
But the secretary should, when people get comfortable coming to him, which is a good thing, he should direct them to the Worshipful Master. That's his job, to deal with any kind of drama.
That's true. Well, and, traditionally, since secretaries serve multiple terms, it's kind of nice. Maybe they do, maybe not for the year, but for the 5-year plan and for the 10-year plan, those are the guys that are leading the lodge long term. Maybe the Worshipful Master is barnstorming for the year, but in terms of steering the lodge long term, I think the secretary has a lot more impact, probably.
No, absolutely, because I think the secretary, I enjoy the role to where people feel comfortable coming to me, and we'll kind of talk it over how to present it to the Worshipful Master. Then if he wants to come get my opinion on it, whatever drama's going on, I'll be glad to give it, but I'm certainly not going to give it to that brother, unless it's something silly, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But otherwise, I'll let the Worshipful Master do his duty and get his training, dealing with
it.
Fun stuff.
All right, guys. So our discussion question for this week, and I guess it kind of ties into that little discussion we had about Worshipful Master versus Secretary, is being a great leader and running a great lodge the same thing?
Being a great leader and running a great lodge?
Mm-hmm.
I would think so, but you can't lead with an iron fist. You're leading volunteers, right? Am I missing something on that?
No, there was a discussion I saw recently that kind of came up between the idea of an administrator versus a leader.
Oh, that's more the secretary's job. Yeah, when it comes to administration part of it, the Worshipful Master, though, by the time he takes the East, he needs to be inspiring and a leader, the guide on the side, not the sage on the stage. But he certainly doesn't need to do it with an iron fist.
I agree completely. I think the one of the essential qualifications of a Worshipful Master is he needs to be somebody who the brothers of the lodge have a lot of confidence in. Somebody who they trust will lead the lodge well. And so hopefully, if he is running a great lodge, it's because he is a great leader and his brethren see him as such.
Totally agree. A good example was Greg giving the coin out at our installation to each of the members and saying a little personal thing to each member.
That was cool.
That was top notch. And when the time comes, it's like the Godfather, I'm going to ask you a favor, So when degree night comes up, he's going to get a good return because those guys are going to have that respect for him.
Hopefully, yeah.
Yeah, hopefully. Exactly.
Yeah, but that was really cool because, for the context of, for anybody that wasn't at our installation, our brand new Worshipful went around and gave a new lodge coin to every member of the lodge that was there. And it was cool. He had a little bit of a personalized speech to everybody, and it was just a really neat sort of experience. And this was after he gave all of the new officers' wives bouquets of flowers, and that was really cool too.
Yeah, that was pretty touching.
Right on. So let's move on to episode content. Today our I guess our specific subject is Jewel P Lightfoot Lodge. And to discuss Jewel P Lightfoot Lodge, we have their worshipful master, David Bindel.
Hi.
So, who better to tell us about the lodge, right?
Yeah, no doubt. It's good to have you on. I was thinking about it today, Dave, about how long we've known each other and where we met. I can't recall. Do you remember when we met and where?
I actually don't remember where we met. That's a great question.
Awesome.
You guys have just kind of nebulously known each other for years now or whatever.
Well, it was kind of like an old buddy, we hit it off because we hit the ground running, like we were old buddies, and had a great time. And I know when Robert Hurd came and we got a chance to really sit down and visit, it was a good time.
Definitely.
Yeah. So when I was thinking of the podcast, you were certainly in mind as one I wanted to have on to kind of disperse what you're doing at Jewel P Lightfoot.
Spread some light.
Yeah. So that's the first question I have. Just kind of break down like a typical month of what you do at Jewel P Lightfoot from stated, and the different activities they do.
Sure. Well, before I get into the schedule, I'd like to read something that we adopted just before I became the master of the lodge. Last year, we adopted a vision statement after Robert Hurd came to speak at our lodge. He spoke about visionary leadership, and we decided at that point we need to have a vision for our lodge and what we want it to become. So we put our minds together and came up with a vision statement. And ours reads like this: a brotherhood of virtuous men, united in heart, mind, and spirit, in pursuit of greater consciousness through philosophical, intellectual, and spiritual engagement, to the end that enlightenment may be revealed. And so since 2016, I guess, early 2016, we've been operating with that vision in mind. And we've used that vision to guide the way that we do things at our lodge. So when it comes to scheduling, we have a stated meeting every month. I'm hoping that will change to be a little less frequent because you all know how exciting stated meetings typically are. But beyond that, we make sure that at practically every meeting that we have some very good Masonic education. And at least once a month, we have a night that's dedicated purely to having a great traditional Masonic experience. And we call that night typically Building the Temple. And what we do on these Building the Temple nights is we focus mostly on education. We focus on Masonic tradition and on having the kind of experience that Masonic heroes from the past, like George Washington or Benjamin Franklin, would be excited to have with us. So we don't want to just drop names of people of great men in the past who were Masons, but we want to be a lodge that they would be proud to attend. And so that's what we do during Building the Temple nights. We have discussion, and we have really a conversation, a dialogue in the lodge, where we learn more about each other, and where we learn about history, and where we learn about Masonic tradition and about what Masonry can mean to us today.
Oh, that's good stuff. So like on the Building the Temple night, what's kind of how do you lay it out? Do you open lodge?
Yes, we usually open lodge. We're actually looking at the possibility of doing this over a festive board or agape style meeting in the future.
Yeah,
where we wouldn't open lodge. But for the last couple of years, we've opened lodge for this kind of meeting, and I usually say some words that will welcome and inspire the brothers who have come, and we usually go right into whoever's on board to present that night. And
gotcha.
Sometimes it can be a big name Masonic speaker from somewhere around the country, but a lot of times it's also one of our entered apprentices or fellow crafts or master masons in the lodge.
Yeah.
Something that we do that's a little unique at Lightfoot Lodge is on the night of a man's initiation, and actually after each time he receives a degree, the Worshipful Master asks him to pay very close attention to the way in which he is transformed following each degree. Because if we're doing it right, these degrees are supposed to be transformational. Mm-hmm. And so we ask the man to pay very close attention. We ask the brother to pay close attention. And, it could be the way that he interacts with the people around him. It could be the way that he thinks about things. It could be the way that he sees himself. Just these little realizations that you have as you go through the degree work, and as you're memorizing and as you're applying the working tools in your life, you're able to see these small changes in your life. And sometimes they're not so small. But we ask them to bring back what they've learned and how they have been transformed to the lodge and tell us about it. So building the temple night is often a place where brothers can show the lodge and their fellow brethren in the lodge that they've made some progress in the degree. And it's their chance to prove that. And that is what real proficiency is, in my opinion.
I wouldn't disagree. So did they do that in a presentation style, or is it just kind of informal, impromptu kind of thing?
It's usually a presentation style.
Gotcha. And like when they're done with presentation, do you guys do questions, or do y'all just like stay in your stations and start talking in that manner, like in a normal open lodge?
Let's see. We do take questions for sure. But we do it in an open lodge. So, we go through the typical protocol for that. Gotcha.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with that.
And, the questions can be for the brother who's just finished presenting, or it can be a question for the entire lodge or some kind of statement for the lodge. Like, here's my perspective on this. And in having those really authentic conversations, it helps us to appreciate each other and our different perspectives on life and on masonry quite a bit more.
No, I think you're hitting the nail on the head of what we're missing by and large, because for men to do that, it's not normal for us to share our feelings. So Texans, we don't, that's not something we normally do. And if you want to make good men better,
society kind of discourages that. They say, no, if you're a guy and you share your feelings, it's a weakness of some kind.
Yeah. And that's what masonry, that's, in my opinion, is what most of the guys coming are looking for, whether they know it or not. They want to be able to express themselves with people and not feel judged, feel encouraged, and know that these guys got my six, got my back.
Exactly.
Kind of thing. So that's really cool. That's actually a very good idea. I mean, we do something much more informal, and we just started it because we were doing a lot of degrees, and we looked up and it's like, what are we doing for us master masons?
Right.
Yeah. We've earned this title. Now let's wield it a little bit. Let's do something for us. So we have the Master's Night, and we do the education elsewhere as well, but it gives us a chance to kind of break down and talk to our brothers,
Yeah,
absolutely.
I like that. It's a very fraternal sort of. It's one of those things where we talk about oh, you don't want to get too lost in the weeds and lose the fraternal aspect of it. And Master's Night is a great way of implementing that while staying productive and fun and, all that. But I think, there's been a couple times where we've put off Master's Night because we've just had a bunch of guys in the pipe for degrees. And, I know that that's not a problem that everybody has to deal with, or that's not an approach that everybody tackles with. My understanding is that y'all's candidates go through the process a little bit slower, right, due to having to give presentations and other demonstrations of proficiency. How long will it take a brother usually in JPL to go from his initiation to being deemed proficient as a Master Mason?
Well, we don't have any hard and fast rules about that, or really even any hard and fast expectations about that. But we have a number of brethren in our lodge who still attend on a regular basis, who have been entered apprentices for several years. And that's not necessarily the norm, but we have several who are in that boat. And in general, I encourage brethren to spend as much time as they need until they feel that they are ready to progress. Once they feel like they have learned what they need to from a degree and built a solid foundation upon that degree, then it's time to move on to the next thing. But until that happens, I encourage brethren to spend time reflecting and studying and learning and having conversations with other brethren in the lodge and helping the lodge out meanwhile. So you have the rest of your life to enjoy Masonry. So being able to build that solid foundation is really something that I wish I had when I first became a Mason. And in retrospect, that wasn't my experience. I was kind of pushed through the degrees really quickly. And I didn't know any better. But, in retrospect, I really wish I had taken more time going through the degrees myself. Yeah,
I had a similar experience. Not that I was pushed through the degrees, but I plowed through the degrees because I was just learning the proficiency, like that, like a steam train. Because I was going, all right, I want to be a master. I want to find out what's at the end of the story. And but because of that, I've had to go back. And when I get involved in these entered apprentice degrees, when I get involved in the fellowcraft degrees, I have to pay that much more attention when I'm in those degrees, whether as a participant or as an observer. That I go, okay, well, I didn't spend a whole lot of time here. What did I miss? And every time I find something that I went, oh man, I totally never realized that. So,
right.
Yeah, but I guess can you tell us a little bit about yourself in a nutshell? I guess maybe as a Mason, or however you choose to interpret that one.
Sure. So the thing that brought me to Masonry, I was in a college fraternity first. I attended the University of Texas at Dallas, and while I was a member of that college fraternity, I became really a ritualist in it. It was kind of a highly revered thing and almost an expectation of my chapter at UT Dallas. And in my pursuit of learning the ritual of my college fraternity, I kept coming across these symbols and archaic phrases and terms in Greek and Latin that led me to do a bit of research online. And I kept coming across articles written by Masons and for Masons about similar symbols that were used in Masonry. And it's not really a big coincidence there. The brother of my college fraternity who wrote its ritual had previously been a Mason, going through the York Rite and the Scottish Rite. And so he integrated a lot of what he had learned in Masonry into the college fraternity's ritual back in the late 1800s. So, as I came across these articles written about Masonic symbols that, were similar or common with my college fraternity, I was really intrigued, and I wanted to learn more and more and more. And so eventually I said, I want to go straight to the source. And that's the day that I set out to visit a few Masonic lodges in the area. and wound up petitioning one of them.
So you were doomed from the start.
Well, I knew what I wanted from the start.
Yeah.
Where were you raised, Dave?
So I was initiated, passed, and raised in Washington Lodge 1117 in Richardson, Texas.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
And that was back in July 2017, so I'm coming up on 10 years.
2007. You said 2017.
Yes.
I was going to say, like, wow, we got a time traveler on our hands.
Notre Dame is predicting his raising.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, see,
cool.
Rhit, look at what you did. Now you're going to get the conspiracy theorists really riled up.
Uh-oh.
So I guess would you say then that was that what was the name of the college fraternity? I didn't catch that.
I was in Kappa Sigma.
Kappa Sigma. So then would you say that Kappa Sigma was kind of like the biggest influence towards you becoming a Mason, or was it just kind of like the whole process?
Well, I had a really incredible initiation in Kappa Sigma that I felt, was kind of almost a more powerful initiation than my Masonic initiations, to be quite honest.
Cool.
And I was so intrigued by that that I wanted to learn all about it, and that curiosity, I think, is really what spurred me on to become a Mason. I was very intrigued in understanding the meaning behind it all. I wasn't content to learn the words and the performance, but I really wanted to understand the reason and the meaning behind it.
So it's not that surprising to hear you say that a different type of initiation might have been more powerful than the Masonic one, just because we have kind of really streamlined it, and we've removed some things from it that are, scary. I've read some degree work from, Scottish Rite craft degrees and from other jurisdictions, and I've had other brothers from other jurisdictions tell me about the way that they handle degrees. And it seems like Texas work has been made more palatable to the general public, I guess. I don't really know how to describe that without sounding offensive to the Grand Lodge. But when you said that, I went kind of like, yeah. It was a really special, powerful experience to me. But, reading all these other ones, I can totally see how other organizations might have a little bit better of a handle on the initiatic experience.
Yeah, I can't really comment too much on older Texas work. Rhit may be more informed than I am on that, but
no, I know that it switched at some point way back, but
yeah, it was. Like,
I think it was Louisiana that they copied first.
Okay.
I could be mistaken, but that's what I've been told. And then we took off with Tennessee's later, and that's kind of where we fall. But I'm talking out the side of my mouth. That's something I've researched.
Well, I guess we would have initially had a lot of Louisiana work since we were chartered by Louisiana, but that's kind of like a really throw it at the wall and see if it sticks sort of statement on my part. So, disclaimer, this is just me speculating. Don't get mad at me, for anybody that listens to that and goes, well, actually. So, David, who as a person would you say has been most influential to you in your Masonic journey?
Living or dead?
Either or.
Well, my biggest hero in Masonry is definitely Walter Leslie Wilmshurst. You may recognize his name. He was an author, an English Freemason, and he authored several books, including The Masonic Initiation and the Meaning of Masonry, which is really a classic. And it was when I read that book, The Meaning of Masonry, that I really was introduced into the idea that there's more to the lodge than just the mundane experience, that there's really a mystical side, a transcendent side, and that this idea has, even among Masons, not always been very popular. But brothers like Wilmshurst understood this and have written books about it. Wilmshurst was was active as a Mason, I believe, in the late 1800s through, I don't know, maybe around the 30s. Yeah, it looks like he passed away in 1939. So he was active as a Mason around the same time that Brother Jewel P. Lightfoot was. And, I'm not sure if Lightfoot ever read Wilmshurst's work, but I'm hopeful that he would have. Anyway, let's see, some other Masonic heroes of mine, Brother Lightfoot, of course, and Lightfoot commentaries. Let's see, Robert Hurd, Chuck Dunning, Kevin Main. These are a few men and Masons who I really, really admire.
Hey, Dave, can you spell Wilmshurst's last names for the listeners out there?
Sure. Wilmshurst, Wilmshurst. Wilmshurst.
Mm-hmm. Go get you. He wrote several books, didn't he?
He did, and his books are not the easiest to comprehend. I remember the first time I read The Meaning of Masonry, there was a lot in it that went over my head. But as I've grown in my Masonic experience, it's a book that I keep coming back to year after year, and it's one that I think I have a pretty good grasp on at this point. But there's still some parts in it that I'm left scratching my head just a little bit as to what he was thinking.
And we have a live listener question about the books that you've mentioned, and would you say that any of those books are particularly good for an entered apprentice to take up and read, or are those mostly more appropriate for masters?
These would probably be more appropriate for Master Masons.
Yeah, there's not a whole lot of books out there that are geared towards EAs.
Mm-mm.
That's true.
Which I recommend Robert's book all the time for that.
The Initiatic Experience. Yeah.
Yeah. Just to kind of get them prepped up, what we're shooting for, kind of thing. Because, something I wanted to touch back on real quick, David. You'd mentioned at the beginning, you opened the podcast with your vision statement.
Sure.
Kind of walk me through the process of how you guys came to that. I mean, did one brother write that and bring it in, or how'd it go?
Well, we went through a few drafts. Ultimately, we wanted to make sure that that virtue was mentioned, that unity was something that was kind of at the center of it, mm-hmm. and the idea that we're doing more than just reading the minutes and paying the bills. We wanted it to be, a pursuit of consciousness, and we wanted it to be something that was deeper. So we wanted to tie in philosophy and intellect and spirituality into it as well.
And when you say we, who does that mean?
So it's something we discussed as a lodge for several months before we adopted it.
Gotcha.
Different brethren left their mark on the final product. But ultimately it's something that we approved unanimously at a meeting. So.
Gotcha. And everybody had a chance to give some input into it.
Right.
Gotcha. I mean, because we did something similar years ago, and the team building that we got from that, the bonds that were created through that, just writing them, much less trying to live them out together, just the exercise of writing one out, man, you had to bring your A game, and it's an exercise every lodge should do.
I agree.
It doesn't have to match, it's going to be unique to your lodge, but just the simple fact of doing it, and you may change it in a few years. That's up to your lodge,
Right.
Absolutely. So just to give a second vision, here's our vision statement at 148. To be known as a lodge that ensures the advancement of Freemasonry and the quality of the Masonic experience. And when you have that staring you in the face, because we had them printed and framed, you try to live it out more so. You're reminded. So figure out what you want your lodge to do and we did mission, vision, and principles.
Nice.
Yeah, the principles are quite lengthy, but they're all on our website. You can check them out. No, I think that's a great thing for every lodge to get into. Absolutely. Something that I wanted to ask you, because I've never been to a Jewel P. Lightfoot degree. Not that I remember. I've been to installation. I've been to, which that installation you did was phenomenal. I never got a chance to tell you. That was very cool.
I appreciate it.
Yeah. But I've been to a couple of presentations over there when Robert Hurt came. But what does your lodge do to try to make the degree special?
Well, I think having to censor myself a little bit since we're on a public podcast.
Absolutely. And maybe leave the part in the degree, what we do in there. How do you make it special leading up, to create that he's about to experience an initiatic experience,
Oh, I see. Well, one of the finer touches that we put on the degree before the degree ever starts, before the man even knows that he's been elected to become a Mason, we don't inform him over the phone or by a text message, or even in person, really. But the master of the lodge will write out a handwritten letter on parchment paper, and it's sealed with the seal of the lodge, and the envelope is sealed with wax. And
that's cool.
That lets him know his degree date, the time he needs to show up, how he needs to be dressed, and tells him that he's really engaging upon something that's serious. And so right from the get-go, before he's even shown up for his degree, he knows that he's in for an experience and that it's going to be something special.
Yeah. And by that time, he knows you guys pretty well also.
Yes. But by the time he gets to that point, by the time we give him a petition, he's known many of the members of our lodge for at least half a year.
Yeah.
That's something that's stipulated on the petition itself, that the brothers recommending him have known him for at least 6 months. And so we take that seriously. And if he's somebody who's contacted our lodge from off the street or through our website, if he's somebody who we don't know, we insist that he comes and joins our lodge for occasional meals that are open to the public for at least half a year to get to know us. We really want to understand what it is that he wants to get out of Masonry. And we want to make sure that our lodge is the kind of lodge that can provide what it is he's looking for. If we're happy to refer him to another lodge that may be more up his alley.
That's such a bold statement that every lodge needs to take into consideration. It's not about adding numbers. It's about adding guys you can work with.
Absolutely.
Because there's a lodge that will fit them if they're into something different. We all should have our own personalities. Some go deeper, some keep it light, some love charity. They're all out there. There's 811 of us. So of course there's going to be.
Yeah. So when, when Rhit touches on personality, what kind of personality does JPL have as a lodge? So I guess in terms of lodge culture, what kind of guys are you looking to welcome there? Who feels home there?
Well, I don't want to offer a prescription for the kind of person that we're looking for necessarily, but I will say that the kind of people that we have as active members at the moment, anyway, are the vast majority of our active membership is between the ages of 25 and 45 years old. We have a few brethren who are older than that who we see from time to time. But for the most part, we are young. Many members of our lodge are getting married, starting families, that kind of thing. And so that's a positive thing. And it's also a speed bump for us sometimes, because you never know what life's going to throw at you. We have brothers who have started the year as an officer, moved to a different state for a job opportunity, and over the course of a few months, come back to Texas and rejoin the lodge. In fact, that happened to one of our officers just this past year, and he has been elected as our junior warden this year. So, anything is possible. Things move pretty quick. Things change here and there. But that's part of, I guess, the process of young adulthood.
Absolutely. We've got a bunch of guys going through the first stages of fatherhood right now in our lodge. It's kind of like a bunch of guys in our lodge all decided all at once to have babies with their wives, and it's like, man, so you got a bunch of sleepless dudes running around, and it's kind of wonderful because they've all got this support network of like, oh, like you don't sleep anymore? I don't sleep anymore. How about that, So that's always
they can share nice. Diaper stories. But we also have an unofficial marriage committee at 148, to where we're keeping tabs of who's fixing to get married because we have a wedding crasher team.
Nice.
No, we had a brother get married and a couple of us got invited and we had such a good time. I mean, what a great opportunity to build some bonds.
Yeah, that was pretty nice.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So I guess kind of on the more serious side then, what problems do you see with Masonry today?
That is serious, Gabe.
Yeah, like, hello, mood whiplash.
Let's bring it down.
I see that there are many lodges that don't have the same demographic of men that you would find at my lodge. And I worry that many of those lodges, 5, 10, 20 years down the line, may not be able to stay afloat if they're not able to bring in younger members. And so I don't have a quick fix for that, and I don't think anyone does. But what that means, if we look ahead a few years in the future, is that I think Masonry is going to be a bit smaller. We're not going to have as many members. We're not going to have as many lodges. But the members that we have and the lodges that we have are going to be a lot more vibrant than they may be today.
So more of a condensing of
concentration, and I like the fact that you mentioned there's no quick fix because if you look at this problem of declining membership, it's been going on for decades. I mean, 50 plus years. There's no overnight fix. It's going to take that longer.
Well, and that's also if we define declining membership as being a problem.
That's true. Absolutely.
Right. In the grand scheme of things, I don't believe it's a problem. But I know that for lodges that are hit by it, it is a problem because those lodges, presumably may demise or need to consolidate just to remain in existence.
Yeah, and this has been something that I have brought up before and has not had very positive reactions, but I'm kind of very much in that camp, where my opinion is that as a way of life, as something that we do, this is not a problem for us. Lower membership, not a big deal. As an organization, maybe yes. When you're looking at the local lodge, and maybe even at the Grand Lodge level itself, declining membership can be an issue, but I feel like as a way of life, it might actually benefit us to be smaller.
Well, you got to look at the positive for sure, but I like how Brad Billings puts it, that it's a symptom of the problem. There's something deeper there that we're missing. And I know you guys do it there at JPL too, to where you focus on your members, because we kind of turned away from that mentality of catering everything to the new member. We used to, he's ready for his degree. Okay, we'll shift some stuff around and we'll do his degree. You got to wait. We do the same thing 6 months to 8 months before you get a petition. So we slowed everything way down and focused on the members we do have, and it changed everything.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think nowadays the way that we take it is not even with our existing members is, he's ready for his degree. It's all right, like he's got his proficiencies ready. Let's make that happen right now. But maybe his degree not. That can wait.
Yeah. Right. At JPL, we want to make sure that before a man progresses into a further degree, that he's proud of what he's accomplished in the degree he already has.
That brings up a good question. So the forgotten degree, the fellowcraft, do you guys have a period that you like to have them wait before they're raised? Because you can learn that proficiency overnight, you know?
Right. So we don't have a set period for it. One of the things that I tried to institute this year that I wasn't as diligent as I should have been about creating content for was a program of study for our fellows that they could go through and read things. I gave them a lot of encouragement to do reading on their own over the trivium and the quadrivium. But I had a grander plan in mind, I think. And I'm sure that'll come about in the future. But one of the exercises I had them do was to build out of whatever materials they found appropriate their own set of working tools of a fellow craft mason.
Oh, yeah.
And I encouraged them to research how those working tools were used in ancient times in building and what their purpose was, how the physics worked behind it, and to think about how those principles might represent what the working tools speculatively mean to us as masons.
Yeah.
So I hope they have a deeper appreciation of what the working tools are, how they're used, how they work, and hopefully how to better use them speculatively.
No, and I mean, it's something that we're struggling with right now that it's caught our attention, and something that we need to do and we've kind of done the same thing with a Big Brother program, but it's just kind of like a checklist, you know, check out this, check out that, read this, or make a presentation as a fellow craft. But it still hasn't slowed it down enough to where, you know, it might be 3 weeks. That's all they've been a fellow craft. And that is the degree for us middle-aged men. If there's one we need to master, that's the one, you know?
Right.
So yeah, that's good. I think all lodge should consider that, because a fellow craft, if you're teaching the EA the questions and answers right, that fellow craft just comes naturally.
Right.
You know, so it can get real quick. So, and I'm going to butcher this, but you mentioned the trivium and the quadrivium. Can you tell more about that?
The trivium and the quadrivium. The trivium refers to the three ways, namely grammar, rhetoric, and logic. And the quadrivium refers to the four ways, and those are arithmetic, geometry, music, and astronomy. And they provide us with a basis for understanding reality as it is, being able to see through unreality, and being able to communicate effectively, and being able to look into the future and see what's coming, and being able to see and find patterns in things. And the trivium and the quadrivium are what we refer to as the 7 liberal arts and sciences in Freemasonry. And the reason they're called liberal arts and sciences are that they were intended to free the mind. And to free the mind from what? Well, things like misconceptions, things like prejudices, things like faulty understandings, things like logical fallacies. And when people are trying to persuade us in ways that may not be good for us, or when people are trying to get us to buy something or to buy an idea, we're able to see through that kind of rhetoric. We're able to see flaws in logic, and we're able to better adapt ourselves in communication to be able to handle those things appropriately. And I think that helps protect us. And if they're used ethically, which we should develop a strong ethical basis in Masonry in our first degree work with the virtues. If we have that strong ethical foundation, we won't be led astray in our own use of logic and rhetoric.
Gotcha. Like, using the powers for the dark side kind of thing.
Exactly.
Yeah. That's a fantastic way to put it. I mean, because that's, like I say, that's the forgotten degree, and there's so much in that degree to go over and philosophize with your brothers about.
Exactly. And the preparation that the 7 liberal arts and sciences give you, being a free mind, with that free mind, the next step is to study the topics of philosophy and theology. When you're able to think clearly about things and you're able to express yourself in a logical way and to use the power of rhetoric for good, and when you're able to see patterns in things, and when you're able to predict the future based on those patterns, you're able to approach these topics of philosophy and theology without colored lenses. You're able to approach reality more as it is, and to overcome your own biases and things like that. And that helps, obviously, when you're trying to find the truth, or when you're trying to study wisdom, or when you're trying to approach the topic of God.
It could be something as simple as figuring out what's fake news and what's not on social media,
Exactly.
They can be used on all kinds of levels. Absolutely. They're way overlooked and need to be delved into, without a doubt. So you'd mentioned that you get petitions from a website. Do y'all get those regularly through the website? Do y'all get a lot of guys through there?
Yes, we are very blessed. I don't know exactly what year this happened. It was before I affiliated with Lightfoot Lodge. One of our past masters, I believe, purchased the domain name DallasMasons.com. And DallasMasons. Exactly, DallasMasons.org. So there are many, many men who Google, how do I become a Mason in Dallas, or Dallas Masonic Lodge, some keywords like that. And we are very fortunate to have such a great domain name that a lot of that traffic comes our way.
That's really cool.
Yeah. No, I think it's vitally important for lodges to have them. And we went through a progression. We originally had a website that was so robust and we got information from everywhere talking about Masonry. And what I've since realized is by the time they're Googling how to become a Freemason, they're already sold. They don't need all that. So the website needs to be pretty basic, little about your history, little about your lodge, the process of joining.
Maybe a calendar.
And maybe a calendar for the members. And just make it have a little esoteric look to it, throw a couple symbols up on it. And it's easy to do today. And you'd be surprised, even in the small towns, you could put it out there to show your community what you're doing. It's too cheap not to do.
Right.
So I guess we've been talking about your Fellowcraft project. Would you say that this was the project you were proudest of during your year as master? And if not, what was the project that you were proudest of during your year as master?
It's probably not the project I was proudest of. I think, let me think back. Some of my favorite accomplishments this past year are that we were able to host the Deputy Grand Master of Prince Hall Masons in Texas.
Oh, cool.
He came to speak at one of our Building the Temple nights and brought a lot of Prince Hall brethren with him, and a lot of brethren from other lodges in under the Grand Lodge of Texas came to visit that night as well, including past Grand Master Elmer Murphy. And so it was a real treat having so many brethren in one place. And we tried to push the envelope a bit over the last couple of years with regard to Prince Hall intervisitation, and we were able to do that very successfully. So I'm really happy that happened, and I hope that in the future things get even easier with our intervisitation with the Prince Hall Masons.
Yeah,
and,
absolutely.
Yeah, I'm sure it'll happen. All it's going to take is some more visits, and I'm sure that'll grease the wheel a bit. So
that does sound like a pretty good project to be proud of. And I guess kind of on the flip side, what was something that you wish had kind of worked out better?
Something we've struggled with at Lightfoot Lodge has been we don't have many past masters who have remained involved. Many of them have moved away, or because the lodge has changed locations, many of our older past masters aren't in the vicinity of the lodge anymore. And some guys, if they were a past master while they were pretty young, they've moved on to other things, or they've gotten busy with family or their career or something like that. So I tried to bring in more of our past masters this year, and we didn't really see many of them. We have a few, of course, that are absolutely dedicated to the lodge, but it's been hard to get some of our older past masters back on a regular basis.
Yeah, I talked to one of y'all's other members who said that he had been trying to send out notices for 50-year pins and stuff like that, and had just gotten a bunch of no's. That he for the Lightfoot 50-year pin mailing list, he'd got a form that says yes, I will attend. Yes, but I need a ride, and like no with regrets or whatever. And then,
right.
I think there was like a fourth checkbox for like the widows to fill out, like member has passed away or something like that. And he said he just got a bunch of no's back. And so I thought that was a really weird problem to have. But like you said, lodges move around, guys get busy, all that sort of stuff. So it's kind of unfortunate.
Well, and things change too. I know our lodge just changed drastically from what it was 20, 30, 40 years ago. So those past masters come back and they do enjoy seeing, because we struggle with the same thing, David. They come back and they love seeing the growth in the young faces, but it's just not the same for them,
Right.
All their buddies aren't there. It's not that they're not enjoying what's there. It's just they're not enjoying it like they used to.
Yeah. Well, it's not like when they were young. It's still their lodge, but it's not their lodge.
It's exactly right.
And who knows? We'll be there. We'll be there someday too.
Absolutely.
Sure.
Absolutely. I hope to be there, but crotchety though.
Oh yeah. Well, you can always ask Brian. He's doing pretty good at the crotchety thing. God bless his heart.
That man. He's rubbing off on me.
Good. We need somebody else like that. Keep me in check. So David, I guess, because we're on the theme of projects, I have a bunch of project related questions.
Sure.
What is something that you have that's kind of like ongoing, maybe like a multi-year project that you've either been continuing or that you started and that your incoming Worshipful Master is going to be continuing, that you're really excited about?
So building the temple is an ongoing tradition, and I know that's one that we're going to be continuing. It may change a little bit here and there as the years roll by, but that's something that I incidentally brought to Lightfoot Lodge before I was ever a member.
Cool.
I was a member of another lodge, and I encouraged to bring back his realizations that he has about himself and present them to the lodge in due time. And he tried to bring it back to that lodge, but had some trouble getting on the calendar. It was a lodge that didn't meet very often at all. And eventually he said, well, I'd like to present this to a lodge, but maybe it needs to be another lodge. So he approached Jewel P Lightfoot Lodge and made the connection, and they invited him to come speak. And anyway, it was that kind of openness that drew me to Lightfoot Lodge as well.
I love that story. If you're not getting what you need, peace and harmony is most important. And if that lodge doesn't want it, just go sniff around. There's one out there. That's so awesome. And Jewel P Lightfoot was better for it.
Definitely. Another interesting project that we worked on this year is brother Jewel P Lightfoot, who was a past Grand Master of Texas in the year 1915. He passed away, and the anniversary of his death is July 14th. And last year, shortly after I was installed, I made a trip down to Austin with several brethren. We went and visited the Grand Lodge building We got to see Orville O'Neill there as Grand Secretary. We got to, and we had a couple of EAs who came along on this trip as well. And so they got to meet the Grand Secretary just shortly after they received their degrees. And that was cool. That was a blast for them.
Yeah.
And, we got to visit, the York Rite and Scottish Rite in Austin. We got to visit San Marcos Lodge, which has one of the most beautiful lodge rooms in the state. And really one of the most beautiful lodge rooms in the country, I would say.
Yeah.
And we also got to visit the grave site where Brother Jewel P. Lightfoot is buried. And while we were there, we had a sunrise prayer service. And we got to have lunch with one of our past masters who lives in Austin. So it was all in all just a great road trip. We got to see so many things. And,
wow.
It was awesome. So we're going to be doing that again this year. I think the dates for that are July 15th and 16th. We'll be taking a trip down to the Austin area, which incidentally is where I'm from. And we'll be visiting Brother Lightfoot's grave and having a prayer service there again.
What a team building exercise.
That's really cool. I love that.
That is. Absolutely. So he's buried in Austin?
Yes, he is. He's buried at the Texas State Cemetery there.
Was he in the military?
I don't believe he was. No. But he did serve as the Attorney General for the state of Texas.
So it got him in. So I've always been curious because I've never seen anything but Jewel P. Lightfoot. What's the P stand for?
His middle name is Preston.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah. And I guess kind of, and I'm going to stop asking about projects after this one, but what is the next project that you want to see being implemented?
At my lodge, in general,
at your lodge, yeah.
At my lodge, gosh. Something a brother sent out to our WhatsApp group this morning was our senior warden-elect, actually. He sent out a message this morning asking brethren if they would be interested in working toward certifications. So he said, hey, who's interested in working toward a C certificate or a B certificate and testing on this sometime later this year? And I think that that's probably going to be a really good project for our lodge because we've had so many skilled ritualists who I guess have been called away by other responsibilities the last few years. It's kind of left our lodge with a bit of a gap there, and so I've had to do a lot of memory work myself. One of my goals when I first became a Mason was I didn't want to get married until after I was a past master, and I don't think I'm anywhere near that at this point. So I'm good there. And I also didn't want to confer any degrees until I had been installed as a master of a lodge, and I made good on that one as well. And over the course of this year, I've been able to confer, I believe, 3 inter-apprentice degrees, 2 fellowcraft degrees, and 2 master's degrees. And those master's degrees were just this month. But Excellent. It was my first time doing that. And so, leading up to each degree, I spent a lot of time learning and preparing myself to be able to give a fantastic presentation of these degrees for the candidate. And somehow managed to pull it off.
Yeah, it's got to have some chutzpah to it for sure. Those degrees can be beautiful if done right. Absolutely. So, if you don't mind, what are the degree fees in Lightfoot?
I'm the incoming secretary, so I probably ought to be a little more well-versed.
I'll put you on the spot.
Yeah, let me pull it up here really quick. All right. Right now, our degrees, we have candidates pay up front for all the degrees. Mm-hmm. They're currently set at $550.
Mm-hmm.
And then beyond that, we charge a $25. We collect a $25 contribution to the George Washington Masonic Memorial, and we also collect a $5 contribution to the Grand Lodge Fund.
Okay.
So,
What's the dues? Yearly dues?
our dues are currently set at $150 per year, and later on this year, before 2018 hits us, we're looking at raising those dues. So we have yet to determine what that amount is going to be, but I'm strongly pushing for our annual dues to cover our essential operating expenses of the lodge. And with that in mind, given the number of Master Masons we have, I think you may see dues go up maybe as much as 50%.
Gotcha. Yeah. And I think lodges should also really take into consideration that, if they don't think they can raise dues and they do degrees throughout the year, raise those degree fees.
Right.
Get up to snuff on your degree work, because if you're going to have them pay top dollar, you better do a top degree. Don't have them come in and you're getting fed lines.
I read an really interesting blog post by somebody who's involved in at kind of like the high-level organizational stuff in Utah, and he's chartered some appendant bodies and stuff like that, and he had a whole blog post that he wrote about what you need to do when you're starting one of these bodies, right? And one of the things that he said that I kind of really took to heart was, assume you will never receive any degree fees at all. And so that he had this idea of like, hey, like your dues, your operating expenses, like everything that you need for a degree should be by default included in however you generate revenue, but don't include the degree fees in there, because you don't want to count on that as a steady source of income. So I thought that was kind of interesting.
I agree. Yeah. I think that's a mistake that some lodges may make, and it's a tempting one, because it means you can keep dues kind of low, perhaps. But on the other hand, it also means that if you don't bring in the number of members that you want, that you'll have a deficit there. And also, if you haven't met that quota of members for a particular year, you may feel pressure to admit people who maybe shouldn't be there.
Yeah.
And I guess if you're trying to go for a lodge culture that encourages to pick only the best brothers, that might be, it might be letting it in an unwelcome compromise.
No. Yeah, you certainly can't count on them, because you never know. The anti-Masonic party could start tomorrow.
Oh, boy. Yeah, I guess so. Now that we've cracked open this can of worms, David, what would you say that your preferred or best, or however you want to put that, strategy is for maintaining good financial health as a lodge?
Well, I don't know who wrote the piece that you were referring to a moment ago from Utah, but I'm definitely in agreement about covering the operating costs of the lodge, the essential operating costs anyway, with dues. And you can't rely on degree fees. You can't rely on endowment returns. And those are tempting to take those things into consideration, but really they should only be considered as icing on the cake. You need to cover your baseline expenses with dues. And that's just being fiscally responsible as Masons and as a lodge.
Yeah.
That sounds very familiar.
No, absolutely, because you can't count on the endowments. That's what builds your rainy day fund.
Exactly.
Same thing with the degree fees. That builds for when the roof goes bad or air conditioner goes out, if you have to deal with those kind of things. Luckily, I don't think y'all do either. Do you guys just pay the temple to rent the room there?
Yes, we do.
Same thing we do at the temple in Fort Worth.
Exactly.
Yeah. So kind of on the darker side of finances and all, finances and membership and everything like that. What would you say, let's say things are going badly for a lodge. Let's not make it either of our lodges. It could just be some theoretical lodge. Things are going badly, low membership, they're running in the red or just barely in the black financially, all of that jazz. Nobody shows up to, or maybe not nobody shows up, but they're having poor attendance. Like, maybe they might not even be able to open up an EA degree. What's your take on that? Should they redesign merge, demit, or close up?
Well, I think we've all heard the story about a county out in the boonies in Texas that has maybe 4 Masonic lodges spread across 4 or 5 towns, and you have the same 5 Masons who are keeping each of those lodges alive in hopes that somebody will join the lodge, but maybe no one ever does, or maybe that's a really rare thing, or maybe they join and never come back. But you have those same 5 guys keeping those 4 or 5 lodges alive, and when that is the case, and there are other lodges that are in the area, I think it's I think it's honorable, and I think it's healthy for lodges to consider consolidation in that situation.
Yeah. Ugly, but sometimes necessary.
No, and all lodges, before they even consider demising or getting that far, they need to find a lodge to merge with. Because there's been a lot of lodges merge here in Tarrant County over the years, and that lodge that merged with them, their history was preserved in a way. Like at Haltom Riverside merged with them. They put up their past master pictures for Riverside.
That's really cool.
Yeah, pay homage. So not to mention you can sell that building and take all those assets to that lodge you're merging with, or keep it as a clubhouse, whatever.
Right. Now, on the other hand, if you're the last lodge in your area, and you've come upon hard times, then that's a very different situation, and that's a tougher situation to consider.
Yeah.
Maybe if you're the only one around in 50 miles or whatever, I feel like in that case you kind of got to fight like hell.
Yeah.
Well, you got to do your darndest, but you better keep close tabs on your books, because don't let yourself run out of money and then you have to demise and that building just withers to the dust. Go somewhere while you still have something to give. Even if it's $5 or $6 grand in the bank in your building, merge with that lodge that is 50, 60 miles away. You may not be able to attend it, but at least it benefited Masonry in some way, because that's a tough one.
It's kind of interesting to see, because each one of us has kind of touched on it a little bit, but it's kind of interesting to see how deeply we're tied as lodges to the physical buildings that we meet in. And I know that that's kind of the case for an organization that has to have a place to meet, but whether it's a church or a Masonic lodge or whatever, but not everybody feels that need, but for whatever reason, we as a fraternity or as a culture really feel that need. And I don't know that it's a bad thing, but I just thought it was kind of interesting that I wanted to kind of hit that, because all 3 of us have kind of brought that up. So.
Yeah, there should be some kind of sense of pride for the building, no doubt, but our degree work tells us where ancient brother met, and that it's not specified to any room or any place. It's just got to be a tiled area. So if you're hung up on that building, or that's where my grandfather took that altar, it's like David just said, while it's a tough decision, it's the noble thing to do, to just merge up and combine forces.
Right on. And then I think we had a note here on a question, so kind of jumping topics here. David, can you tell us about your international Masonic talks? Or not talks, travels?
Sure. I've never spoken at a lodge internationally in a formal sense, but let's see. Back in 2008, I was a grad student at UT Dallas at that point, and I had a really nice scholarship. I was a Eugene McDermott scholar. It was a 4-year scholarship that gave me kind of a full ride and some money for living expenses, and a fund to go and study abroad. So I wrote up a proposal asking to go and study culinary arts over in the Mediterranean part of Europe, and that proposal got shut down really quickly. So instead, I wrote up another proposal asking to go and study the culture of Freemasonry in the Far East and Southeast Asia, and set out on a journey for 5 months visiting the Philippines, Japan, South Korea, Hong Kong, Taiwan, Thailand, Malaysia, Singapore, essentially everywhere that regular Masonic lodges exist on that part of the world. And as I was doing so, I had just been raised as a Master Mason about 1 year after that, and joined the York Rite, went through the Scottish Rite one-day class just I think maybe the month before I left on this trip. So while I was overseas, I got to visit a wide variety of different Masonic groups, including York Rite, Scottish Rite, Blue Lodges, in a variety of different countries and a variety of different Grand Lodges. It was my first time experiencing English, Irish, and Scottish Masonry. I got to experience French Masonry, practicing the ancient and accepted Scottish Rite, which was phenomenal. Seeing that practiced in the Blue Lodge, in the Symbolic Lodge, and a Dutch Lodge as well. So there's just so much out there, and it really opened my eyes to what all is possible in the realm of regular Freemasonry. And when I came back to Texas at the end of that trip, my eyes had really been opened to what Masonry could be. And as I got back to my mother lodge at that point, I found myself more and more disappointed in the way that we treated Masonry in general in Texas. And I was looking for something deeper, something that I had experienced in lodges, underground lodges that date back long before the Grand Lodge of Texas existed. And there were these special experiences that I got to have over there that I found myself wanting more and more of. And these were things that just weren't happening and sometimes couldn't happen in Texas. And I tried to bring the idea of Masonic education to my mother lodge, which was really trying to pick it up by its bootstraps. It was tough. Sometimes I would give a Masonic education talk at the end of a lodge meeting. And as soon as I would stand up, some brothers would, their ears would perk up, and they would congratulate me afterwards and say, wow, that was really interesting. I really enjoyed that. We need this in Masonry in Texas. And
Wow.
other brothers would say, they'd stand up and you'd see them kind of I would stand up and you'd see them roll their eyes a bit and say, oh, come on, the game's on tonight. We need to get home. It's almost 9:00. So, it was that kind of attitude that really turned me off and got me seeking a different kind of lodge and a different kind of lodge experience. And I'm very proud to say that at Jewel P Lightfoot Lodge, I've been able to make that a reality. We had the right people in the right place at the right time, and we made a great Masonic experience happen. And we make it happen nearly every week of the year.
That's awesome. And so I guess would you say then that your international travels led you kind of to try and form or join or form more of a European concept / traditional observance lodge here?
It was definitely something that I became interested in. While I was on that trip, I was listening to some of the older Masonic podcasts that were popular at the time. I don't really even remember their names. I think there was one called The Digital Freemason, and another one with Eric Diamond, I believe. Maybe that's the one I'm thinking of. But I remember one podcast interview in particular. Brother Cliff Porter was being interviewed, and he was the Worshipful Master of Enlightenment Lodge 198 out in Colorado Springs, Colorado. And I heard what Enlightenment Lodge was doing out there. And I said, that's what I'm experiencing here in some parts of Asia. And that's what I really want out of Masonry. So when I got back to the States, I was kind of turned on to this idea of traditional observance or European concept Masonry. And I saw that the Masonic Restoration Foundation was having its first annual symposium, and it was being hosted at Cliff's Lodge, Enlightenment Lodge. And so I was still a student at the time, and they said, hey, we have a scholarship for brothers who might not be able to pay their way here. So I took advantage of that, got to stay at a brother's home there, and got to experience what the MRF had to offer. I wound up going back several years to the MRF's annual symposium. in future years, and it was just something that was eye-opening to me to see what lodges all around the United States were doing. And the thing is, outside of the English-speaking world, outside of the United States, a lot of Canada, a lot of the UK, what we know as traditional observance is known just as Freemasonry.
Yeah, that's the standard over there. They don't have to reach above and beyond.
Exactly. So it's something very extraordinary here in the U.S., but overseas, it's something that's expected, I think. It's part of what Masonry is. And so I'm really excited about the prospect of some of those traditions being restored in the United States. And, it's happening. And lodges that are involved in this kind of thing are the ones that are succeeding. They're the ones that young men are interested in. There's a desperate hunger for this kind of special Masonic experience.
And I guess
because
go for it, Rhit.
Well, I was going to say, they're going to every lodge out there, but they're not staying because they're not getting what they're looking for. And we've turned that corner in the last 3 years to where, we couldn't run them off now.
Right.
They're vested in it.
Yeah.
My goal in Texas at Jewel P Lightfoot Lodge is to always make sure that our meetings are meaningful and that no brother leaves a meeting regretting that he had been there. We want to make sure they get value and meaning and a real quality experience every time they come to lodge.
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
touching on that, because you've mentioned that young guys around the world are hungry for this kind of experience. I had a question that I had in my notes that actually really ties in. I feel like that ties into that. How compatible would you say that Masonry in general is with modern culture, and how compatible would you say that Masonry as practiced by JPL, other TO lodges, or maybe as lodges that adopt some, but maybe not all of the MRF standards, how compatible with Masonry as practice there be? Versus Masonry in general versus TO versus regular culture. Where's the crossover?
So, Lightfoot is a lodge that meets every Thursday currently. Frankly, I think that's too often for young men my age, especially if they're starting families or really pursuing a career with their whole energy. And so I would like to see a lodge meet maybe 2, maybe 3 times a month if they have a degree going on. But I think any more than that, you really start digging into how are you going to be able to attend lodge all the time, and you start picking and choosing which meetings you go to, and you miss some. And if the lodge is meeting every single week, I think it makes the meetings less special, because if you miss a week, you say, oh, well, it's just another week. We meet every week of the year. It's no big deal. But then you start missing week after week after week.
Yeah, because all of the, they're all less special, so it's not a big deal.
Right. But if it's something you have to plan ahead for, like I know my lodge is meeting these 2 nights this month and I want to be there for at least one of those, you'll make it a priority.
That makes sense. So then how often do you think, and I know you mentioned this earlier in the podcast, but how often do you think that we should be having stated meetings? Would you say quarterly or every other month, or?
I'm hoping that Jewel P Lightfoot Lodge will change its stated meeting schedule to meet every other month. I think if we went quarterly, it might be a little too infrequent to deal with some of the petitions and other business that needs to be handled only at stated meetings. Mm-hmm. So I would suggest an every other month kind of thing. But again, every lodge is different and has different needs and expectations from its membership. So, the things that I'm saying right now aren't true for every lodge out there. But I think for my lodge, we could probably give every other month a try, and I think it would work out really well.
Yeah, and that's a good way to handle it, because then that way, if you meet on, the second Thursday or whatever, or, because we meet on the second Monday, if you have your standard stating meeting time freed up all of a sudden, like, if you wanted to turn that into something like, hey, like, we're going to have a dinner this night, or, hey, we're going to do a degree this night, and we're only going to do a degree this night, so maybe like something more focused,
Right. And that's really something that we've changed over the last 2 or 3 years at JPL. We used to try to fit everything in on our stated meeting night, and then we would have practice nights, and we would have the occasional degree night, the occasional education night, that kind of thing. But what we did is we broke out the educational portion from our stated meeting, where it was given maybe 10 to 20 minutes of time, and we turned that into building the temple, where it's really the whole focus of the night, and we could spend 2+ hours talking about something and continue it over dinner. And by the way, another interesting practice that we have at Lightfoot is that we have dinner after the meeting. And so this encourages us to keep some of our mundane business, the discussion on it, kind of brief, so that we can get out there and eat. And, when we're doing something more important, it means that, we're all looking forward to a meal afterwards.
That does sound pretty useful then, that people a little bit more focused. And actually, I was actually going to ask you about that, of whether or not education should be part of stated meetings or separate, but you already answered that.
Well, we still have some nominal education at the stated meetings, but most of it is focused during building the temple.
Yeah, and that's kind of what we've moved towards with the Master's Night. We have usually Rhit, sometimes somebody else stands up and gives 5 minutes of education during stated, and then the really heavy stuff we focus on Master's Night. So,
well, that's great.
I like that approach. While we're on education, and we've asked this question before, and usually the Bible is the first answer that we get. So, assuming that the Bible is the first book on this list, what would you say should be on every brand new Master Mason's reading list?
I really like John Nagy's book, Building Hiram. The whole building series, I haven't read all the books, but I've read a couple of them, and they've been really good reads. The Meaning of Masonry is good for... It's a good read, I think, shortly after you become a Master Mason, but I wouldn't expect anyone to understand a lot of it right after becoming a Master Mason. That's something you need more wisdom to be able to understand. And you get that through experience. Another book by W. Kirk McNulty, who is also a big devotee of Wilmshurst, is his book, The Way of the Craftsman. I understand it's been very recently republished. It was kind of hard to find for a bit, but it's been republished. It's available on Amazon.com or any other place where books are sold, I think. Excellent book. That's probably a better introduction to the works of Wilmshurst than Wilmshurst himself for the newer Mason. Another one, Contemplative Masonry by Brother Chuck Dunning. That's been published in the last year or so, and that's a fantastic read as well.
Wow, that is an awesome list. I feel like that's like an arsenal of education right there. That's great.
Definitely. And this isn't so much about Masonic history as it is about understanding Masonry. And, if I can give advice to the Brotherhood in general, it's this. If we focus on the meaning of Masonry, not the book, but what it really means, we are going to provide so much more value to our members than if we focus on any of the other things that we do. When we focus on what Masonry is, when we have a deep understanding of truth and of wisdom and of our relationship to deity, that's really the whole purpose of it. And if we're not doing that, we are failing. Even if we build great charitable institutions around this idea, if we don't have that core, we're failing. Yeah. And so I think whatever we do, we always focus on that and make that our predominant desire. If we take care of that, everything else will follow.
Wow, I feel like I need a mic to hand you so that you can drop it. That's really cool. But what an amazing cornerstone to build a strategy off of. Maybe that doesn't need to be a vision statement. Maybe that doesn't need to be a purposes or whatever. But if you set out with that as kind of like any time that you set out to do something in your lodge, and you say, well, how does this relate to what this means? I feel like that's a really powerful starting tool. That's very cool. Thank you for sharing that.
No. Hey, David, have you read Cliff Porter's books, his Traditional Observance and the Psychology of Freemasonry?
I have read The Secret Psychology of Masonry, but I didn't get around to reading his Traditional Observance Lodge book. I think I gave that one away before I had a chance to read it.
Yeah, I've gotten through half of it or so, but I went and saw him because I heard you mentioning that you heard him on a podcast, and it kind of set a spark in you to start the TO movement at JPL. And same thing, I went to Round Rock years ago and saw him give a presentation on the Secret Psychology of Freemasonry, and it just like, I was like, what? Wait, what's going on? Freemasonry can be this, and it set me ablaze. Yeah. That guy's a phenomenal man. There's no doubt.
He is. He's somebody who I've met on a number of occasions. I've traveled out to visit Enlightenment Lodge a bunch of times, and I'm good friends with a lot of the guys out there. I do want to make one thing really clear, though. Jewel P Lightfoot Lodge is not a TO lodge. So that's not something we do. But a lot of the same things that inspired the TO movement in the United States are things that we respect. And so we've also been similarly inspired.
I've had some people tell me that, this is not knocking y'all or anything, but I had a conversation with somebody that says, well, I can't go to JPL because TO lodges are clandestine. And I was kind of blown away by that level of misunderstanding. But, for our listeners, traditional observance lodges are regular. They are permitted under the Grand Lodge of Texas. How would you say that one? No, this was somebody that I was talking to anyway. But how would you say that, because at Fort Worth, we've also adopted some traditions that are TO-esque in nature. But, we are decidedly not a TO lodge either. How would you say that you differentiate yourselves from TO lodges?
Well, in the minds of a lot of people, I think there's a misconception that traditional observance means that you dress up really well for lodge, and that may or may not be a part of it. But I've always thought, I've been to many lodges around the world where, the lodge may dress up in tuxedos. That doesn't mean that they really understand what's going on. They may be a very typical lodge that's dealing with reading the minutes and paying the bills, and they just happen to dress up in tuxedos. And in my mind, what they're doing is kind of essential. They're taking care of the bare basics of running an organization, but they're not taking care of their Masonic mandate to provide education and to provide enlightenment to their members. And so you can dress up a pig, you can put lipstick on a pig, but it's still a pig. So TO is not about dressing well. Where dress does come in for TO is having some kind of uniformity in the lodge, and it's a way of showing respect for something that you take very seriously. And so it's a way of covering those two things. But beyond that, dress is not a way to say our lodge is better than yours because we dress well or because we dress better. We at Jewel P Lightfoot Lodge, we welcome brethren no matter how they're dressed. We encourage brothers to wear a suit and tie whenever we're opening up a lodge. But aside from that, if we're just having a practice night or something like that, we'll have brothers come in really casual. So now, what is it that really does differentiate our lodge? I think we take things very seriously. We try to provide a lodge environment that's very solemn, especially anytime the lodge is open. There's a great deal of solemnity. It's not joking around. We have plenty of time for that before and after lodge, but we're not joking around. And we're especially not joking around during degree work. And unfortunately, I've sat through a number of degrees in other lodges where I've seen people snickering on the sidelines or whispering or even talking during a degree performance or opening and closing the lodge. These are moments that are really sacred, and if we allow them to, it can be one of the very deepest experiences that a man might have. And I wouldn't want to have that moment ruined for a man just because somebody didn't have the proper decorum in the moment. So we take the solemnity of the lodge environment very seriously at Lightfoot Lodge. The lodge is a spiritual instrument that we direct to effect real change on the initiate. And if we're not initiating somebody, then that change is supposed to be directed at the members of the lodge. We operate with lower lighting than most lodges use that I've been to. We want to kind of make the lodge experience something that's a bit different from your everyday life. We want you to realize that you're in a different place, that you're in a holy place, and in fact, that we are building a temple.
Oh, I like the fact that you point out the decorum in a degree, because you're so PC with your talk, because you say you've been to a few. I bet if you go to a degree, 10 degrees, you're going to see jovial, conversations going on or whatever at 7 of them, or some kind of joking around.
Sideline stuff. Ugh.
Yeah, you see it, especially in the master's degree at a specific part. You see people joking around with a candidate or whatever, and it's like, But I mean, you could even be holding the right decorum and whisper something to a brother like, "Man, he's doing a good job," and the candidate he can hear it, but he doesn't know what it said. Now he's off. I mean, he's off his initiatic experience. It's that easy.
Right. So, you're distracting him from the experience that he's supposed to be having. And that's
absolutely. Yeah. He paid for this thing. This is his moment. It's like a wedding for a woman. Guys don't get many moments like that. So, I mean, how long does the degree last? Maybe 45 minutes, half an hour for some degrees. You can hold your tongue that long, and make it all about him.
Absolutely. And so the difference is that we're not just at Lightfoot, we're not just holding back our words during the degree. It's that nobody wants to do that. We have a desire to be there for the candidate and to make that experience one of the most powerful experiences of his life.
Yeah.
No, I think when you turn that corner and you start actually semi-meditating in lodge about passing energy to this brother in his moment, there's some magic can happen then.
Yeah. And Rhit, you'll remember this because you were part of it, but David, recently we tried implementing something in a master's degree. For those of you that know what I'm talking about, there's a portion where somebody leaves, actually several people leave, and then they come back. And usually that happens very quickly. All right, guys, let's go. All right, guys, we're here. And there's often only a few seconds. And so I talked to Rhit before we had a master's degree very recently. And I said, Rhit, I want us to wait 2 minutes. Total silence. Not a whisper, not a cough, nothing. And then we ring the bell. And David, you wouldn't believe, or I guess maybe you would believe, but man, people, everybody knew not to whisper or anything like that, but it looked like people were about to lose their minds. It's really hard to get Masons to shut up for 2 minutes.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, it was a long. It's really because you're used to the degree flowing a certain way, and we're trying to add every little detail, add a little value here, a little something more for the candidate, because that gave him a moment to just kind of comprehend what just happened, because that master's degree is full of moments that they need a second,
Oh yeah,
to bring it in. And I loved it. I think that's something that we're going to continue doing for sure.
I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah. So kind of jumping subjects, you mentioned how special y'all's meals, or how special y'all shoot for y'all's meals to be and everything like that. Can you tell me a bit about y'all's festive boards and or table lodges? I guess we're not allowed to do table lodges here in Texas, right?
Right. We don't do table lodges in Texas, but something we do after building the temple on a monthly basis is we hold what's known as an agape. And agape is a Greek word meaning love, and there are several Greek words meaning love, and agape is one that particularly means the love between a creature and its creator. So it's the kind of love, the unconditional love between God and creation. And that is an ideal for the kind of love that we ought to have between brothers.
Very cool.
And anyway, the idea behind it is not so much that it is a good meal, although it is that, but it's more of the time to share, to continue sharing with brothers in fraternal fellowship. And during our agapes, we typically sit in a traditional U-shaped form. This allows it kind of mimics the seating arrangement that you would find in a Scottish Rite symbolic lodge, where the wardens, one is seated, they're both seated along the west side of the lodge, one in the north and one in the south, watching each other's columns. And so that's where the shape comes from. But the other incidental benefit to this seating arrangement is that it allows all the brothers to see each other. And this means that during the course of the meal, if only one brother is talking at a time, and if the group is not engaged in a lot of small conversations all around the table, it means that you can have one coherent discussion between all the brothers of the lodge. And so we use it as a time for further Masonic education. We use it as a time to go over Masonic news. We use it as a time to maybe continue some of the discussion that was started in Lodge. If there was an interesting position that was brought up in Lodge or an interesting question that brothers want to talk about more, it's a time when we can continue that dialogue.
I went to the one before your installation. It was beautiful. I mean, it was something. I know that was a special occasion, so there was like 60, 70 guys there, it seemed like. And it was a great evening. Absolutely. And it doesn't necessarily have to be that formal for every lodge, but get together with your bros and break bread, man. There's some magic happen there as well.
Absolutely. Now, you mentioned that term breaking bread, and that's an interesting word. If you look up the definition, well, in French and Spanish-speaking countries, you'll encounter a strange term if they open lodge on the fellowcraft degree or if they're doing anything that involves fellowcrafts. And that's that they don't call them fellowcrafts in those countries and in those languages. They call them companions or compañeros or compañeros. And the root of that word, compañón or compañero, is com, meaning with, and pan, meaning bread. So it's a companion is one whom you have broken bread with. And we go on to use that term companion in the United States in the York Rite, as you go through the Royal Arch chapter and the Cryptic Council and in the Allied Masonic degrees. But really, it's someone who you've broken bread with. So it's kind of that closer familial tie that you have with that person. And that really applies to fellowcrafts and anything beyond fellowcraft.
Yeah.
And that's something that I've brought up before to people that have asked me questions about the York Rite, is that if you pay careful attention during the master's degree, that's, fellowcrafts don't call each other brother. So,
right.
And
very
so
true.
I thought that was kind of interesting that's that you see that in other languages and in other jurisdictions. That makes a lot of sense, actually.
Hmm.
Do you do educational stuff at the dinner then? Is that something that you focus on, or do you kind of say, well, we already did all of this at the building of the temple. This is more focused around the fraternal relationship?
Well, I would consider pretty much everything we do at JPL is in some sense educational. Even those agape meals that we have, it's fraternal in that we're getting to know each other better. But we do that through dialogue that tends to be about masonry. It tends to be about personal experiences and that kind of thing. So you really do have brothers opening up, whether it's in the lodge room or around the dinner table. It's not rare for a brother to cry.
Wow.
There you go. That's what I'm talking about.
We have a trusting environment.
Mm-hmm.
We have that culture of trust and respect for each other, and we're there to be authentic. To thine own self be true.
Yeah.
We are there to be who we are, to share in our glories and in our defeats, in our strengths and in our shortcomings, and we're there for each other, and it's an amazing experience.
Yeah, I mean, that's something that's going to last a lifetime for a brother to get to that comfort level to be able to express himself in that way. He'll never forget that. Never. And
absolutely.
What a great opportunity it is for us to be a part of that. There's nothing else like it out there in the world, because even if you go to church, that the preacher gets all those fun moments,
Right.
But we as brothers can create that environment to make it happen, and we just miss it. I mean, if I can take one from Las Vegas, what happens in Lodge should stay there. And when brothers realize that, you're going to see them open up more and more, and they get more comfortable, they get more trusting. Next thing you know, you got a lodge.
Yeah. And you're right about that, Rhit. It really is so hard to find that kind of trust and that kind of place for men in the world today. When men get together, most times in the world these days, it's to watch sports or to drink beer or simply to eat and making jokes and that kind of thing. And that's great. That's a necessary experience. It's part of being a man. But if we want to develop ourselves more emotionally and psychologically, we need this kind of environment that the lodge can provide. And if we don't ever give ourselves space for that, that's a part of our psyche that is going unnourished, and it can lead to a lot of problems.
Absolutely.
I'm really thankful that my lodge is such a place where we can have that outlet, and it's not just about sports or the latest NASCAR race or something like that.
Absolutely. I mean, because if we're living by the old adage of, that's part of the process. It's not all about cupcakes and candy canes. There's some hard moments to have with brothers, either being a shoulder for them to cry on, because that's tough. That's an, I don't want to say an awkward situation, but it's an unusual situation for a man to be in. And it's a unique opportunity.
Absolutely.
Yeah. That's really cool.
So, David, for lodges that are thinking about implementing agape dinners or something similar like that, what advice do you have for people that they don't have that and they're thinking about bringing it? Maybe they did it in the past and they haven't done it in years, or they're trying to bring it back, or they've never done it and they're trying to start it.
Well, with all of these things that we're talking about right now, I go back to that putting lipstick on a pig analogy. You can try to do any of these things that you want, but unless that's actually who you are, you're probably going to have trouble finding it welcome and getting it adopted. So I think the first thing that you need to do is figure out who you are, figure out the identity of your lodge. It could be a vision statement like we were talking about earlier, or it could be just figuring out, going around a table every few months and saying, what do we really want to get out of our Masonic experience? What are we missing here? Is there something that we are doing that maybe we're not getting any value from? Or is there something that, maybe it would be good to try this or see if we can get any value out of it? Or is there something that maybe some ideal that we'd like to see our lodge achieve? Maybe we don't know how to get there, but let's at least voice these things and try to get something on the roadmap and let the brothers think creatively about how to make it a reality. So I think those kinds of discussions are really important to have about how can we make this dream in our minds a reality.
You make a great point in that the discussion, because it's going to start with a single brother. They're going to start the discussion, but they can't just show up at lodge and go, hey, I'm going to do education tonight, or we're going to do an agape. And that's not the way the lodge has been doing it the last 20 years. There's a process to it all, and it starts with those discussions. And you'll find out quick enough if you do your footwork whether that's something that's going to be accepted or not. And
right.
If you need to go, you might have to go find your own JPL and get it going. When you went to JPL, how many active members were there?
I think there were about as many active members. There's some different faces in the lodge, but it's really about the same number.
Gotcha. No, I think that's a great thing for brothers to do. And I mean, it's like you said, anything they want to implement, they need to have that discussion. So, talk to your bros.
When we've mentioned people bringing ideas to the table and things like this, and acting as leaders. When it comes specifically to line officers, what does JPL look for when it comes to formal leaders?
So it needs to be somebody who, specifically for elected officers, it needs to be somebody who is dedicated to being there for the lodge. Running a machine like Jewel P Lightfoot Lodge is a really big commitment, and it involves quite a bit of time and devotion to make it work well. When people drop the ball, it kind of shows. And so I think you need to make sure, absolutely certain, that the brothers you elect to be the worshipful master and wardens of your lodge are brothers who are absolutely committed to being there. If no one else shows up, they will be there.
Yeah.
Beyond that, I think that you need to be looking for a brother who is wise, who is virtuous, and who has a great vision for the lodge to be the master of the lodge. He is there as a leader to inspire the other brothers and to draw designs upon the trestle board and set the craftsmen of the lodge to work. And if he doesn't have any inspiration in himself, how is he going to inspire others around him? If you're just pushing a brother through the chair because it's his turn, I'm afraid you're probably going to get what you would expect from that. And that's not anything very good.
You're going to have a rough year. Or a quiet one at best.
Yeah, rather a quiet year than a rough one, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
So, again, jumping subject, because I was reading more about some of the bullet points that the Masonic Restoration Foundation has on their websites. And they've got that got my brain burning. I mean, I went and I'd read those ages ago, and I reread them last night, and I was going, oh, man, there's so much cool stuff in here. But do y'all use music during degrees?
We don't during degrees. We occasionally have a procession with classical music before we open the lodge. As we're coming into lodge leading up to the opening, we'll play music during that. And sometimes we'll play music after the lodge is done as we're shutting things down. I found that after the lodge is closed, too often brethren just kind of erupt into chatter that they may have been holding in during the meeting. And small talk starts happening. inside the lodge room, and meanwhile, a few brothers are scurrying around the lodge room trying to get everything put away and get the building locked up so we can go have dinner. But a lot of times there's a lot of chit-chat happening around the lodge room at that time, and it's not very helpful. So I found that playing a little bit of music immediately after the lodge is closed helps to keep that solemn environment in the lodge room, and it either pushes the brothers who would like to talk out of the lodge room and into other parts of the building, which is more appropriate, or it helps to just maintain a sense of solemnity inside the lodge room as brothers kind of start putting things away. And I think that really does help decorum.
I really like that. I've never really thought about using that as a directive sort of tool. That's very neat.
Ask Brother Hondo, and I'm sure he would be happy to oblige.
Yes. Usually we do it as right before we close lodge. And so everybody, right before we do the closing of the lodge, everybody kind of sits there, and you see a lot of people just kind of close their eyes and listen really intently. And I mean, there's this big meditative man, I really messed up the syllables in that up. But anyway, there's a big contemplative sort of aura that comes over the whole room, and everybody gets really quiet, and you just listen, and it's this magical sort of experience. So I think both ways of doing that are just wonderful, because music can really instill some good in the soul. So,
absolutely, I want to echo something that Brother Brad Billings said on the last episode of this podcast, I believe. And that he said that there's a charge that we used to use in Texas, a charge at opening, and it's printed in old Texas monitors. And so this is publicly available, and this is used in many other Grand Lodges around the state still. But it's kind of fallen out of use in Texas, but it's still permissible. And that charge goes, "The ways of virtue are beautiful. Knowledge is attained by degrees. Wisdom dwells with contemplation. There we must seek her." And so I think that contemplative experience inside the lodge room or on the periphery of a lodge meeting is really important. And, if I can just reiterate my love for Brother Chuck Dunning and his book, Contemplative Masonry, that can give you some really great ideas on how to have a contemplative experience and a contemplative practice established in a Masonic context. And it is very, very Masonic thing to do.
While I have not, kind of integrated it specifically in a Masonic sort of way, I've, since my early teens, I've been a practitioner of meditation, and it's just one of those things that even 15 minutes a day really makes a difference. And I notice when I don't sit down and clear my mind and just, sit and exist without a whole lot going on and just kind of meditate, I really feel the lack of positivity that quiet moment gives. So I think, that the whole idea of seeking contemplation, there's really something powerful to that.
Absolutely.
Do y'all use a chamber of reflection?
We don't.
Okay.
That's something that we in Texas are not allowed to use.
Okay, yeah. Because I know that there's some ways of doing it that are appropriate, but it's a very altered, different sort of form.
Well, my personal opinion on the chamber of reflection is that yes, it's very appropriate, but it's currently prohibited, so we don't.
Yeah. Well, and kind of the way I look at it is that the chamber of reflection, as presented in popular media and is adopted by many lodges in other jurisdictions and sometimes in Texas, nobody's saying that anybody's doing anything, but that is out there. That tends to be very inspired by the French, I think I'm saying this wrong, but Écossais traditions, which are not really based in Preston Webb work, so they're not very appropriate for the work that we do, but that we can have very appropriate moments like that. So, granted, we can't really do that here, but we encourage candidates to think about certain things. But
well, absolutely, sure,
yeah.
And écossais, by the way, is just the French word for Scottish.
Yes,
and so it's part of the Scottish Rite there in France, and it's used before each of the symbolic lodge degrees. And we do have a chamber of reflection in the United States, and at least one degree in the York Rite.
Mm-hmm.
And if it's present in the York Rite, which is essentially the Preston Webb ritual, I can't think of any reason other than a Grand Lodge's prohibition of it why it ought not to be used in a symbolic lodge.
Yeah, well, because like Gabe kind of alluded to, we can't have chamber of reflections, but we can have anteroom of reflections. And you can put your candidates in there and start that process, or continue the process, I should say, of getting him ready to receive his degree. It shouldn't just be some, nonchalant thing like, I'm going to push you in the closet and you change your clothes. We'll be back in a minute. It should be more than that. Can't put skull and crossbones in there, but.
Yeah. David, is there anything special that y'all do with your prep rooms in terms of making them as presentable as possible, or is there kind of something that you guys have done?
Unfortunately, at the temple we meet at, we don't. It's kind of a non-traditional lodge room setup. There are 2 lodge rooms in the building, and both of them are very non-traditional, unfortunately. So we have to make do with kind of an alternative room to prepare the candidate in. And we don't really have anything special in the room. We do try to make it presentable. We do, have him sit down and encourage him to prepare himself mentally for the degree. Usually a brother will sit there with him for a little while and ask a few questions, kind of calm his nerves a bit if he's just driven in through rush hour traffic, and make sure that he is mentally in a good place, and give him some encouragement that he's about to embark on a very serious endeavor in becoming a Mason, and that there's not going to be any horseplay, and that we're all there engaged in something very serious for him, and that he understands the gravity of the occasion, and setting the right mood really gets the rest of the night off to a great start.
Yeah, I mean, what's the candidate going to think after he hears that conversation, as opposed to put on this outfit and we'll be back to get you in 10 minutes?
Right.
He's going to be thinking about dinner at that point. But after the conversation you're going to have with him, he's going to be thinking, at the very, very least, what have I got myself into? What's about to happen? And he's really projecting himself into that degree, and he'll get a lot more out of it.
Exactly.
Hands down.
So, David, I wanted to ask you, what is your happiest memory in the craft?
I think one of my happiest memories in the craft was, I'm so thankful that I had the opportunity to travel the world as a Mason and see a lot of different things and the way things are done so early on in my Masonic journey, because it's inspired me so much. It's shown me some things that are possible, and it's given me greater ideals for what the craft can be. And it's shown me that just because somebody says that's not possible doesn't necessarily mean that it's so. It's taught me to think for myself more. It's given me a lot of reason to make friends in different parts of the world, to learn languages that I otherwise would have very little interest in studying, maybe, and also to travel and have these incredible experiences. And so I'm really happy that I got to have that experience. Now, beyond that, a particular moment that I was happy about was the night that I was installed as the master of Jewel P Lightfoot Lodge. It was a bit non-traditional because I like pushing the envelope a bit, but in a sense, it was maybe the most traditional Masonic installation that's happened in Texas for many years. We had a tiled installation which we're not the only lodge in the state to do that, but that's pretty rare to see in Texas. So there were only Masons who were present for the installation and also for the banquet. And it was a special Masonic experience. That's what we wanted the installation to be. And it was something that I had been pushing for several years before I became the master, and something that there was always a lot of pushback. But when I was elected, they said, okay, well, you can do this your way. So yeah, I said, all right,
your year.
Yeah, this is your year. You can do it your way. So we did it my way. Rhit, you were there for it. We had a big banquet celebrating the feast day of St. John the Baptist. And afterwards, we retired to the lodge room, opened up an entered apprentice lodge so that our entered apprentices and fellow crafts could be there. There had previously been a Master Mason's Lodge opened and called to refreshment, so everything happened legally and according to the book. But we opened an entered apprentice Mason's Lodge while we were there and proceeded to the installation. Now, the installation started off really normal. Installing me was Brother Kevin Main. We were in a darkened lodge, a little bit of a different environment than what you would normally find. But it was in a tiled lodge, and Brother Kevin Main, who's a great Masonic hero, was installing me, and Brother John Tolbert from San Marcos Lodge was our installing marshal. And so Brother Main proceeded to invest me with the jewel and insignia of my office as master, which is the square, and gave me that spiel that goes along with it. Gave me the Worshipful Master's charges and obligation, really, to which I assented, and afterwards gave me the charge to the Worshipful Master, which is a little bit out of the usual order. After that was done, he had the marshal seat me in the east and asked the marshal to declare the installation of the Worshipful Master alone, which Brother Tolbert did. And then I proceeded as the installed Worshipful Master of the Lodge to install the rest of my officer line myself. And that was
legit.
None of them were expecting it except for the secretary who I had talked it over with beforehand.
That's cool. I like that a lot.
It was a really special touch, and it was amazing. And afterwards, after we finished the installation, the rest of the officers were declared legally installed, duly and constitutionally, by the marshal, and then we closed the lodge, and then we took photos. So it was one of those experiences where, because it happened in a tiled lodge room, there weren't any photos happening at the event, but those memories will live on in our minds and in the legends that will be told about our lodge for years to come.
Yeah, it's not a night I'll soon forget. And if I remember right, you did that by memory.
I was able to do most of it by memory. I did have a sheet that I had to consult a few times, but it was a very special experience, and I put a lot of work into it, and all the brothers who have served as officers this year have put a lot of work into making Jewel P Lightfoot Lodge what it is. And
it's awesome.
It's such an amazing lodge to be a part of.
Well, I've got one last question. I don't know about Gabe, but I wanted to ask you what keeps you motivated.
Well, I'm not in it for honors. I don't have any aspirations to be a Grand Lodge officer or Grand Master or anything like that someday. Really, the highest position in my mind that I wanted to accomplish, which I'm nearly there, is to be a past master. And I'm very happy being on the brink of having done that. And so what'll keep me motivated beyond this? I think it'll be to keep this great lodge that we've built over the last few years. It was something different before that, but I think over the last 10 years or so, it's been built into something that is really, truly great and exceptional. And I want to help keep that propped up and going and providing value and a meaningful and utterly Masonic experience to its members. I want the members of the lodge, of Jewel P Lightfoot Lodge, and every other lodge, ideally, to be world-class Masons. I want them to be able to go to any lodge in the world or any Grand Lodge in the world and be able to look another brother in the eye and meet with them on the level and not feel like they might be missing something. I want them to have a great understanding of Masonry.
Yeah. No, I think that's a great way to stay motivated, because it's an endless supply of new candidates and, old brothers there that'll always be appreciative of somebody there adding to the environment, so that'll keep you motivated for eons. So we need to wrap this thing up, Gabe. What do we got? Closing thoughts now? Yeah,
let's talk about closing thoughts. So David, if you wanted to leave us with kind of an elevator speech version about, and I know we've already kind of encountered multiple versions of this throughout this episode, but if you kind of wanted to leave us with, Jewel P. Lightfoot, elevator speech, what y'all are doing, what y'all are going to do, what y'all are hoping to do.
I think I will close by quoting the words of Brother Jewel P. Lightfoot that he delivered on the floor of the Grand Lodge of Texas when he was the Grand Orator. Onward, upward, and Godward forever.
Nice. He's so awesome.
You can't get much better than that.
Absolutely not. Guy's a Masonic treasure in Texas and worldwide for that matter. It's a great guy.
Honestly, we've got an amazing fraternal quote for this. We've got an amazing fraternal quote for this week, alone with that excerpt from Brother Lightfoot's talk. The one that I had for this week, we close every episode with a fraternal quote, is the quality of the craft must not be permitted to continue to decline. We must recognize that the organization is much larger than the combination of all its component parts. We say we are a brotherhood of man under the fatherhood of God, a fraternity designed to make good men better. If this is what we are trying to save, we should re-examine our approach. If we make good men better, we succeed in the purpose of the craft, and these better men will continue to lead the world. If we fail, the whole world loses. And that is by the Right Worshipful Thomas W. Jackson from his essay, What Are We Trying to Save?
That's awesome.
Yeah, so
that's a good one.
I don't think it's quite as good as that blast from Brother Lightfoot, though, because there's something to be said for succinctness. Just condensed.
No doubt. So before we close this down, I don't even know if we mentioned that we're missing our Trekkie this evening. Did we mention Grant? I'm sure everybody figured out
we said
Grant's
that
not here.
Grant can't be with us tonight, but yes, he is with us in spirit, I am sure.
He is indisposed.
Yes. He is taking care of his regular vocation, so good for him.
Yeah. Well, David, I can't tell you how much I appreciate you coming on. We'll do this again for sure if you would. I always love to chat, man.
I'd be happy to, and I thank you so much for the invitation, Rhit and Gabriel. It's been great talking with you tonight, and I've really enjoyed my time on the podcast.
Thank you so much for being on.
You bet. This is Rhit Moore signing off.
Gabriel Jagush signing off.
And David Bindel signing off.